one of the founding members to one of the best bands that came out of the 1980s out of London, England area, lead singer Jay Aston of Gene Loves Jezebel. Jay, what's happening, my friend?
Hey, Jeremy, how are you doing? Very well, thank you.
Good, man. And I know you grew up in Wales, and shortly thereafter you moved over to London, England. And what were you listening to as far as music inspirations during your childhood?
Well, childhood, oh wow, I've got a lot of older brothers, so I listened to a lot of stuff that they were listening to. So the first things I really liked were the Beach Boys, Leonard Cohen, this is when I was about 10 or 11, Led Zeppelin at that age, David Bowie, trying to think what came through, but the biggest influence was, the John Peel Show in England. I don't know if you ever heard of that.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
And then he was the guy that used to play, when I got to about 13 or 14, T-Rex became an influence, and I started going into things like Kraftwerk, Killing Joke. Who else can I think of? Always into singers, so I like anything from Patsy Cline, jazz, but I've always liked a good song. So anyone's written a good song has been influenced, and I've liked tons of all kinds of music. Miles Davis, I listen to forever. What else do I think of off the top of my head? The Byrds, all that kind of stuff I like. Anyone's with songwriting and has their own voice. That's always been my personal thing, that I've always tried to sound like nobody else, and so I've always gravitated to people who've got their own sound,
Yeah, absolutely. I totally agree, Jay. And you definitely have your own signature sound with the band Gene Loves Jezebel and what you're currently working on. And what's the interesting story, Jay, behind the formation of Gene Loves Jezebel? I know you put it together with your brother Michael. Is that correct?
Yeah, I played a bit of guitar and I sang, so I was always working on music. And then Mike got interested in it too, and so there's two of us. We were half a band already. And we met a guy called Ian Hudson, and so we were on our way, really. But my brother moved up to London to join another band, and so I continued working on my own, with my own songs in Wales. And then when I moved up to London, that band didn't pan out, and he just joined me with the songs I'd written. So I had a plan. I thought, oh, well, London's a good place to go. There was a thing called the Institute of Contemporary Art, the ICA. It sounds very arty, which it is, the place, but they had a rock week every week, so bands from all over the country played. And you always got a lot of press, so I thought, that'd be great if I can get on that. So I submitted a tape, and they liked it. We got on that, then we got a good agent, then we got a record deal, and we were up and away, really, pretty quickly from formation.
How did you guys get signed to the Situation 2 label? How did that all come about?
That was my brother and Ian, the original guitar player. They walked into Beggars Banquet, because that's the label that had Bauhaus, The Associates, Gary Newman, a bunch of bands at the birthday party, tons of bands on it, Cocktail Twins, and they just walked in and they played the tape, a couple of my songs, Glad to Be Alive and Machismo, which they liked, and so they arranged a gig so they could see what we were like live in the Rock Garden, which is now the Apple Store in Covent Garden. If you've ever been to Covent Garden, that was a famous rock venue there called the Rock Garden, but the Apple Store has taken over it now, but it was a beautiful building, and that was our first gig, and we got signed from that. The Associates manager, Peter Kent, Bauhaus's manager, ran the label, but we signed to them, but they folded quickly because he went into other areas of management. He didn't want to run with the label, so then we signed to Beggars.
Okay, right. And there was a very cool track, Jay, called Influenza on the band's debut album, Promises. The song was intertwined with some great percussion work. I play drums, so it really caught my ear. And how was the song Influenza discovered?
There's a song I wrote called So Young, which is one of the first songs I ever wrote. And Ian Hudson, our guitar player, I would often, as it always has been with the band, I'll come in with an idea for a song, and the musicians usually take it a bit further. So he kind of plays the riff and plays it acoustically. It kind of just, we just went into the B minor chord to A, and percussively, I don't know what, I think Richard Hawkins, still a great friend of mine, he's the original drummer on that. It was just a nice break from that, because they had a pretty intense album, the first album, and it's a nice kind of pause, reflective kind of song away from it. So, yeah, I don't know, it was just one of those things. You're just writing, and we liked it, and so we put it on the album.
Okay, cool. And what was that first American tour like for you personally, Jay, with fellow Welsh artist John Cale? How was that experience like?
Oh, well, interesting. We didn't tour. We played some gigs we met John Cale in London. It was around Christmas time, and we went to New York to record. We'd never been to New York, but we ended up doing a few gigs in London with John. That was amazing, because he's obviously a legend. He seemed quite eccentric to us. He's much, obviously, we've young then, still teenage, 19, whatever we were there. So he was an amazing person to meet. But our first American tour was amazing because we'd never had any intentions of ever touring America, concentrating on Europe. And we were due to tour in Italy, because we had a big following in Italy.
Mm-hmm.
There was Liverpool played Roma in a soccer final in Europe, and there was a riot, and 36 people got killed, and so English clubs were banned from Europe for a couple of years. And so all, like Aston, the Fall, for instance, we were advised by the Home Office not to actually tour in Italy. So my brother was friendly with a lady called Ruth Polsky, who's no longer with us, but she used to run a club called Danceteria in New York. And she said, come on over, do a couple of gigs with us. There's a thing called, I forgot what they used to call it. There was a rock seminar there every year. And we ended up going over for 2 gigs, and we ended up on the road for 3.5 months. So it was quite a weird trip. And that was absolutely amazing because, obviously we were very colourful and very theatrical. It was part of our what we used to love to do. And we were literally shoved in a small bus, not a small bus, a sort of small van with our gear. And, there's a book in itself in that story. So we went around the USA about 3.5 months.
Very, very cool. Yeah, I'm sure there is a book in there somewhere, Jay. And when you guys recorded the second studio album, Immigrant, what was that experience like for you personally to be in the studio and work with producer John Likely?
John Likely was amazing. We'd worked with John Brand before for the first album, and we'd started work on the new album with John Brand. There are a couple of cuts that John did, which I actually prefer to the to Immigrant. I think Immigrant's a really good album. But there's a couple of cuts we did with John I really like. But Lecky's a phenomenal engineer. He's obviously worked with Pink Floyd and many people since. He was the Falls producer at the time as well. But and he's gone on to work with obviously the Stone Roses and tons of people since then. It was an interesting experience. He was because different producers have different ideas what to do with songs. I'd write a song like Stephen, and
right.
he'd put a middle eight in there, which I didn't think it needed. But people liked it, so. It was a great album for us to make. So it was a magical time. It was freezing winter and covered in snow in Herefordshire, which is in England, a very beautiful part of the world. And in a couple of weeks, we'd produced. What up to then was our best album.
It's so funny. I grew up here in Los Angeles in Southern California, and I grew up listening to K-Rock, KROQ in downtown Los Angeles. And the very first track that I heard from you guys was on a show called Rodney on the Rocks, and he played a great tune called Desire. And was that song was completely written by you, correct? Well,
to be honest with you, a lot of the songs were written by me. I'd share them just because otherwise the band they couldn't earn any money. How does a drummer earn any money if you don't share the publishing with them? So I'd often share publishing, but sometimes with a song like Desire or Sweetest Things, I'd be like, hang on, this is too personal to me. So it's a very much a song I'm proud of, and it was the first song that I'm actually singing the vocals on a single. And, it was the song that broke us around the planet, basically. So, because, it's a very difficult song for other singers to do, I think.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I don't think they can.
Yeah, well, thanks. And some try, even my brother, and it's, it's no offense. I don't mind people doing their own version of it, but I think people deserve to hear the guy who sang it as well.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. And Jay, you were saying there was a personal thought for the song Desire. What was that personal experience that had you come up with that song Desire?
I think there's a lot of truth in when people say you write your best songs when you're depressed. I was in a very blue place, very dark place, and I was just looking for release. I guess that's where the title Desire comes from. And you totally own your own little shell. You have you and the guitar, and it's almost like mantra. Like I just went around the rhythm I'd written. Those 3 chords, B, D, and A, and just built on that little loop that I'd built. That's the song that came out. So yeah, very pleased with that song.
The House of Dolls studio album was a great success here in the States, and the tune Motion of Love was a tune that I think all of you guys in the band kind of collaborated on.
Well, not really.
Okay.
It was Pete. It was what happens with Gina's Jezebel. Usually, it's me and the guitar player, a bass player, and the drummer. We'll just lock down in a studio and record 3 or 4 of my songs in a day. But Pete came out with the bridge part of the song, as far as the bass part, and James came up with those chords, for the chorus there.
Mm-hmm.
So it's just three of us, and then we went. I mean, we used to record 3 or 4 songs in a day very quickly because we're a good band. We just bang 1, 2, 3, bang the songs out, and that's what we sounded like. But we signed to a big label like Geffen, and these big labels, they want to spend fortunes and change everything you've done. And we spent 3 months in LA just working on 2 songs when we'd already recorded classic demo versions of them. So
right.
It was a bit painful. My brother added "Do You Know What You Want" part in the bridges.
Mm-hmm.
People love it, and that's all that counts, really. But I think it's a bit overproduced.
I read in some reviews that you thought it was a little overproduced, and I mean, you guys have had a completely different producer, and like you were saying, every single producer has a different direction and a different meaning of what they want to accomplish in the studio, and it's so funny how a producer and an engineer think so differently than musicians do, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, they can hear different angles, and I mean, yeah, it's difficult. Sometimes you're thinking, why don't they use this vocal, and why have they gone for that drum track? I mean, the demo, the Suspicion. I mean, Suspicion is great on the album.
Yeah.
And Jimmy Ivan did a great job with Chris Chris did the take, and they said that's the take, which is great when you've got the rhythm track down so quick. But the demo of Suspicion is phenomenal, so I'm very proud of it lyrically, and I love the way it moves. But it's a great song, even the kind of rockier version we do. But there was an EP released, like a special, just stuff that wasn't on the album.
Mm-hmm.
And Suspicion is on one of those, and it's I think we gave it like a cassette, if you remember those.
Oh yeah.
With House of Dolls, and if you can find that original Suspicion, I mean they're both good, but I really love the original.
And tell me, Jay, what are you currently working on?
Well, I've been working on a thing called Ugly Bugs, which is UGLY for ugly, and Bugs with double G, and it's me and Pete Rizzo, the bass player. And it's very, very theatrical. It's all, you'd have to see it. If you check it up online, you'll see it. And it's very quite grand scale and vocally very dramatic stuff, and I really love doing that, and it's a very different entity to Gene Loves Jezebel, or even my solo stuff. So that's something Peter and I have been working on. We've done one gig, which was great, a festival last year, and we're trying to get some more gigs, but it's very difficult to get something new off the ground. But we're proud of the record, and people do pick it up, and we're getting feedback all the time from it. And then there's stuff I do on my own, but I'm actually working on new material for a new EP, and I will be doing other gigs to highlight that new material.
Okay, cool. And what's the best website, Jay, for everybody to get more information on you?
I think just find me on Facebook. I'll let people in as long as they're nice,
Hey, you let me in, Jay, so I guess
I do. What I do, when people ask to be friends, I have a quick look at their, how they behave, or their friends, if they've got mutual friends, and I just do it by, if they behave themselves, they stay on. And most people do. I've had very few people over the last few years that I've ever banned,
Right.
Generally, people are really nice, and they're fans, and they can get my sense of humor, and they can see my pictures and the little movies I make, and little demos I put up there too, and all the links to anything Ugly Bugs, Jay Aston, Le Jaybird, which is another little project I'm working on, and Gene Loves Jezebel. It's all up there, and and then they can find my Twitter and all the access to the other pages too.
Okay, cool. And Jay Aston of Gene Loves Jezebel, thank you so very much. I really appreciate it.
Oh no, thank you, Jeremy. It's a pleasure.